So welcome everybody. I'm Joe Murphy. I'm the director of the Center for Innovative Pedagogy. This is just about the halfway mark. We had a day and a half of wonderful sessions, and we're looking forward to another day and a half, starting with our keynote by Mehebeli. I do want to acknowledge that we're coming from Kenyon College in Gambier, Ohio. And we acknowledge that the lands on which we live, work, celebrate, and heal are the ancestral homelands of the Miami, Lenape, Wyandot, and Shawnee peoples, among others. The disputed Treaty of Greenville in 1795 and the forced removal of indigenous peoples from this region allowed for the founding of the college in the early 1800s. As a community, we're committed to confronting this dark past while also embracing, through education and outreach, the many indigenous communities that continue to thrive in Ohio. So welcome to our keynote today from my colleague and friend, Dr. Mehebeli, on why DEI might not work towards socially just care in institutions. Mehe is Associate Professor of Practice at the Center for Learning and Teaching at the American University in Cairo. I know her best as co-founder of the organization Virtually Connecting, which was a grassroots movement that worked to fight academic gatekeeping at conferences by making them more available to people who couldn't attend for any variety of reasons, which has been an organization that really changed my professional practice and knowledge. Mehe is widely active. If I tell you everything she's done, we won't have any time for her talk. But she's a co-facilitator of Equity Unbound and works with their collaboration with 1HE on community building resources. Some Kenyan folks will know that I've sent around those resources for good online sessions. She writes and speaks frequently about social justice, critical pedagogy, and open online education. She blogs regularly and tweets regularly. And again, Mehe is both an intellectual force to be reckoned with and my friend. And I am just thrilled to introduce her today. Take it away, Mehe.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everyone, for having me here. I'm really looking forward to being with you all. And I just want to let you know this is going to be an interactive keynote, so I hope you're ready to type a little bit and even sometimes unmute and talk if you're comfortable with that. So yeah, so I'm talking about why might DEI not work and talk about how we move towards socially just care in institutions. This is my Twitter handle, Bali_Mehe. Feel free to screenshot any slides. And the slides are actually with a Creative Commons license, which you can't see because of the way Zoom does things, but you can share them and reuse them just non-commercially and with attribution. And I always start my keynote saying, Assalamu alaikum, which works morning, night, evening, works for hi and bye, and works across time zones. And I also always like to ask, how are you feeling today? And so for today, I'll ask you to use Slido. I heard that you guys used it recently. And so you can either use the QR code on your phone or just type slido.com on any browser with this number 0965442 to get in, and tell me in one word or a phrase how you're feeling. And if you're feeling multiple things, just enter each one of them. You can enter more than one feeling because it's not always one feeling that we're feeling. Yeah, thank you, Opikin. I don't know how to say your name. I hope I said it correctly. Okay, happy, fantastic, scattered, tired, excited. Scattered is big. All right, tired. Yes, I get that a lot. After lunch sleepies. Yeah. Content. Hungry. Go get something to eat. There's no reason to stay hungry. Get something to drink or eat. I hope you've got something nearby. With the pandemic, I started to always have lots of snacks and drinks around me all the time because I'd be in an online meeting and I can't get up and go to the kitchen, but I always like to have something with you. Someone has a headache. I'm sorry. If you want to look away from the screen, if that helps, or unplug your headphones and just listen through the computer, that might help. I don't know. Helps me usually. Summary. Okay, it's really hot today, so summary, but not in the good way. Someone's sick. I'm sorry to hear that. My daughter's sick. There's a virus going around these days, and everyone's immunity is down because they've been wearing masks for so long, and then now they get sick very easily. She's like the only one in her school who still wears a mask. So grateful. I'm glad to hear that. Focused. Fuzzy brained. I'm fuzzy brained half the time now. And if anyone's having trouble using Slido and you want to type your answer in the chat, that's also totally fine. I like the word cloud because it highlights the excited and tired are pretty big. And grateful is bigger now. Excited is still bigger. Lots of people having after lunch sleepies, so that's interesting. All right. All right, I will move on from this. We will use the chat a lot more during the session, and we'll come back to Slido later for another activity. The link to my slides, and Joe, if you could type that into the chat for people, it's bit.ly/Kenyan Valley. So you can comment on these slides later if you prefer to follow there. There should be alternative text for the images if someone prefers that way of following, and you can leave me comments afterwards. So if there's something that comes to you after the session is over and you want to tell me about it or ask me about it, you can just leave comments. They're Google Slides. Okay, and here's what to expect today. We just did the checking in of how you guys are feeling. We're going to do a chatterfall where I'll ask you some questions and ask you to respond in the chat. Then I'm going to share a model that I worked with a colleague of mine called Mia Zamora. It's called the Equity Care Matrix. And we share something about socially just care and why equity or care work does not always succeed. Then we'll do an activity called TRIZ, which is a liberating structure. If you've never heard of this, it's a lot of fun, and we'll decide how to do it when we're together. And then you get to choose the rest of the keynote. There are so many things I could talk about. I think when Joe and I met to plan today, we couldn't choose which ones necessarily you guys would want. So we'll do the things that the people in this room want to hear about the most. So we'll vote on that. And then I'd love to hear your takeaways towards the end. All right, and Joe did the land acknowledgement at the beginning before he started. And since I'm not with you, I always just like to say this quote about how coloniality survives colonialism. So even though I'm not in the US, I'm not living on settler land technically, but it's always good to remind ourselves that it's not just about that element, it's all the things in ways that coloniality is maintained alive in books, in the criteria for academic performance, in cultural patterns, in common sense, and self-image of people, in aspirations of self, and so many other aspects of our modern experience. And any modern subject is, we breathe coloniality all the time and every day. And it's important to remind ourselves of that all the time. And of course, if we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, this is essential. And then just to note about any term, almost any term that we use, apart maybe from social justice, is always feels incomplete. Like you say equity, or maybe equity is not enough. You know, maybe when you say DEI, that just groups it all together as if all of it is enough. Inclusion is never enough, right? Because you're including people to something that maybe already exists. Diversity glosses over the power structures, right? So any of these terms don't work. But those of us who work in that field, who care about these things, we know that, and we just need a term to be able to talk to each other and to other people about it. The one that I've heard recently, JEDI, with justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, that I've seen some people do, and I guess probably kind of cool, but then I read people say, but the Star Wars Jedi is not a good example of this, because it's kind of a white savior type of attitude. So yeah, knowing that sometimes people use the wrong term. I was yesterday in a session and I said, you people, and then I tried to fix that and say you guys, and then someone said you guys is masculinist. And what I'm really trying to say is a plural for people, which you don't have in English, and then maybe I'd say y'all. Anyway, so just to remind ourselves that this is always, the terms are always incomplete. And the important thing is the practices are also always things that we can keep improving on. So let's start with the chatterfall. All right, so tell me in the chat, what energizes you these days? I like idea. I like adding accessibility to that. I really like that. Thank you. I'm taking note of that, Debbie, because I'm embarking on an initiative that could benefit from this a lot. Doesn't have justice, but it's okay. People get scared, unfortunately, from terms like justice. But accessibility, they like to say, they don't know how to do it, but they like to say it. A as anti-racism, right? But that only focuses on racism then, which is important. Because sometimes that's the biggest inequality or oppression that people around us are facing, right? So what energizes you these days? Ideas, good one. All right. I want people to tell me what energizes them these days, but I love the things coming from there. Music, summer break, students. Yes, students energize me all the time. I think undergraduate students especially, family and children. Yeah, I think younger people generally energize me. I think that's the thing. It rubs off, I agree. The ocean, the garden, yes, nature does that, right? Summer break, yeah. outdoor time, stories of success, what's going well, working with others across campus to remove barriers, decrease unnecessary cognitive load for students. That's amazing. Card games. My kid loves card games. And now she likes card games on the phone, which now that's a problem because the idea of card games was to get her eyes off the screen. And now she likes doing them on the screen. Michelle taking a couple classes. Yeah, learning energizes me too. Warm weather energizes you? That's interesting because I think warm weather makes me lazy, but I'm glad it energizes you. So that's good. All right, so my next question is, what's something you achieved in the past year or two that you're proud of? You want to tell me about? Yep, that's a big achievement, Trina. Getting your kids through your immersion remote school when we didn't sign up for it. PhD, Caroline, that's amazing. I think people who got their PhD during the pandemic should have that on their CV, where it says got the PhD during the pandemic. Because I finished my PhD while my kid was 2 years old, and my country was going through revolution. So I think that's a different achievement than just finishing a PhD, right? Diana, good semester teaching general microbiology. All right. Maintaining sanity and a positive attitude. Emily, that's a superpower, I think. Getting a paper out, Christina, congratulations. And that has also been really hard, right? Dog, Eric, oh, I hope he's an adorable dog, or she. Raising your kid and they are turning out fine. That's huge because you never know what will happen with that. To survive pregnancy and first year of his life in isolation while working full-time teaching remote. That is hard, Kat. That is really hard. That's a big achievement. Organize this conference. Yes, congratulations, Joe. Converted from Turk conference. Wow, tenure track. That's amazing. Congratulations. And tenure, Jared. Wow. All right. And increasing faculty engagement and development, Rebecca. Opportunities during the pandemic. That's great. Converted from adjunct to wow, this is good news, you guys. Ashley. So lots of you are in a good place in that, and I'm happy that the institution is valuing you and your work. Catherine began writing in earnest. That's great. All right. What's the WHEW? That's something different than what I think it is, right? Oh, Hugh, what is that?
I think it's just that one. I think it's whew.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So my next slide was just me talking about the thing that one of the best things I've achieved recently is these community building resources, which I'm not sure if you guys have seen them before, but I'll talk about them later if that's something you choose. Basically early in the pandemic, just when we realized that we're going to start fall online and people started talking about, oh my God, I don't know how to build community online if I've never met the students first. And they thought it was impossible. If they had never taught online before, they really thought it was impossible. And I also realized that a lot of the literature on online learning wasn't going to help them because a lot of people were teaching synchronously and that's not how online learning was. So we co-curated this website full of just people, me and other people a lot of the time, but also other people just, here's how you can build community online. Here are good introductory activities. Here are good warm-up activities. Here's some structures you can use in your class, and just doing videos of them where we practice them so you can imagine how they're done. And then giving you adaptations, like if you don't have breakout rooms, you can do it like this. If you have to be asynchronous, you can do it like that. So, and this started as me and a few of my friends doing it with, maybe we had started with 6 resources, grew to 30. Now it's over 50 resources and people keep adding to it. If you have anything, please contribute. Like if you do something really interesting in your classes that helps build community, any modality at this point, it can be useful. All right, I think this is the last one in the chatter poll is, what is an unexpected thing that brought you peace or joy recently? Long drive, 7 hours. Oh, wow. That's interesting. It sounds tiring, but you guys in the US, you have, you do that more often than we do. I've tried it a few times. Didn't feel that way. Daily yoga, meditation, practice, and gardening, yard work. Husband playing out in the band, so much fun. Taking guided forest bathing walk on my campus with a staff colleague as a guide. Wow, I have no idea what a guided forest bathing walk is. Unexpected cat snuggling. Yeah, that sounds good. Traveling to London in May. Awesome. Seconding the cat snuggling. Okay. Cleaning your office. Okay. I have a colleague who's like you, Michelle. I'm not like that, but yeah, I know some people that brings them joy and peace. So actually one unexpected thing that brought me peace or joy, I think it was joy lately, is a student of mine who graduated sent me a screenshot. We have, you know, the rate the professor thing at AUC. At my institution, they have a private Facebook group called Rate AUC Professor, where they just chat about teachers. They're not just rating them. And so when someone's trying to take a course, they give feedback on the teacher. And so one of my ex-students screenshotted a lot of people recommending my course to people. So that was nice. Nobody had ever done that for me before. All right. So before we move on, I just want to acknowledge something important that Bell Hooks has said, and it's that teachers who care, who serve their students, are usually at odds with the environments wherein we teach. So if you feel like you're doing that and your department doesn't encourage it, or you don't have a lot of colleagues who believe in it, or they think like you're not being rigorous because you care, you're not alone. A lot of us feel that way. And a lot of structures in our institutions don't help us do that. So Mia Zamora is one of my colleagues that we've worked together a lot. This matrix we first developed for a keynote we did together in 2020, and then a paper we just published recently. It's called the Equity Care Matrix. And it started out by us asking people on Twitter, what is care and what is care without equity? If you have some thoughts on what this is, I'm going to write the question in the chat and share my screen. So what is equity without care? What is care without equity? What comes to mind when you see that? You don't have to respond to both questions, obviously. You can respond to just one of them if that one comes to you faster. It's not like one correct answer, by the way. We got many very different answers to this question. Care without equity can be favoritism. Yes, teacher's pet. The isms, care without equity. Yes, because you care for some people but not others. Equity without care, robotic, algorithmic. Yes, yes, care without equity, incomplete care. Yes. Yes, you're right, Caroline. Like tracking students from marginalized backgrounds, but they don't have a human touch. Exactly. Yes, equity without care, right? Land use statements are care without equity. That is, yeah, I hear you. I hear you on that. Like, what are you doing for them besides the acknowledgement, right? It's lip service, I guess is what you're saying, right? Let me see. Prioritizing diversity in hiring who without attention to retention, exactly, or without attention to their success or their comfort. I agree completely. Jared, equity care seems like it can be ineffective, one size fits all. Yeah, right. I agree that can happen as well. Care without equity seems like it would just be words without actions. That could be. Equity without care is trying to get everyone to the same endpoint without worrying about the consequences of the trip. I love that, Christina. I have never heard anything like that, but I agree with you completely. It's about it's focusing on the goal of equity in the end as an outcome, but not the process and the journey. I love that so much. I'm gonna keep that if that's okay. We have one, but can't seem to find any outreach to local Native communities. You're talking about trying to figure out what to do with Native communities. Yeah. All right, so my Google Slides doesn't want to share very easily. I'll give it a minute. Care without equity can be self-sacrifice in an unhealthy way. Definitely, right? You burn yourself out with the effective labor because you're the only one who's caring, right? Or there's a small number of people caring and not equally distributed. All right, so here are some of the things we got from Twitter from different people. And people said that equity without care could be tokenism or diversity theater, check the boxes of doing stuff, lip service, systemic, could be systemic. Like it's good to have equity which is systemic, but if it's done without care. And then performative, this is what Sarah Ahmed says, calls it performative. And in Arabic and in Islam especially, we say riya, which is you do something to look good rather than to be good, to intentionally mean it. And then we think, no care, no equity, systemic injustice. care without equity, we thought selective labor, so kind of like that teacher's pet thing, and effective labor, which someone was just talking about now. Ameliorative in the sense that it solves the problem at hand, but not long term. Also like a band-aid, right? You fix something temporarily, but you don't fix the root cause, right? And so what is equity with care? Hopefully it's social justice. Hopefully it's parity of participation, which Nancy Fraser talks about, that gives everyone equal space at the table. So not just bringing people to the table, but equal power to control what happens. Or intentionally equitable hospitality, which we'll talk about in a minute. When we were writing our paper to publish, the Equity Care Matrix paper, it's not in press, it's actually published, and the link is at the earlier thing. So systemic injustice stayed the same. They asked us to give each quadrant one name. And so for the equity without care, we called it contractual equity. So you have a contract to do equity, but you're not really doing it with care. And we called care without equity partial care, because the word partial signifies partiality as in being not fair to some people. And someone said that's the isms, right? And it also means that some people receive care and some people don't, kind of like the teacher's pet. And it also signifies that some people are giving the care and some people aren't. So the word partial, covers the spectrum of care without equity, we think. And then we thought what equity with care would be is socially just care. And that's kind of the thing we're trying to work on. And we think that intentionally equitable hospitality is one of the ways of doing that. And intentionally equitable hospitality, and I'll put the link to the paper here. It's something that, Joe was mentioning, virtually connecting, that we did, that we used to do, we used to volunteer to do, which is bring people in to spaces that they couldn't be at. We were very cognizant of the fact that it's not just about bringing them in, it was about making that conversation equitable, even though some people were together and some people were virtual, and some people could afford certain things that others couldn't, and that power still existed, right? So intentionally equitable hospitality is meant to redress injustice in different phases. So there's a pre-design, like before you even design the thing, ask who's involved in the design, who's funding it, what are their impositions, how might they privilege certain groups over others, and then how do we redress that? And then who do you involve? Like, I was talking to someone here, we want to do a module on accessibility and bring in students with disabilities to decide with us what needs to be in there and to suggest for faculty how they can make their courses more inclusive, And then in the design phase, does the design anticipate or respond to inequalities? Which oppressions does it redress and which might it reproduce? And we keep asking ourselves those questions. And then in the moment, the facilitation, a lot of educational technology and instructional design work and faculty development work is all about helping someone design a course, but then when you're actually in the moment, you need to respond to certain things. And there's this concept of intentional adaptation that Adrienne Marie Brown talks about in her book, Emergent Strategy, which is, what your goal is, but then new inequalities might arise in the moment, and how do you intentionally adapt towards your goal, right? And then there's this other concept called generous authority, mentioned by Priya Parker, which is to recognize that as a teacher, removing your power from the room doesn't remove the power from the room. There's still going to be power dynamics between the students. And so how do you use your authority generously to empower student voice, right? And to make sure everyone has an equitable opportunity to participate. And virtually connecting was all about using our voice and our power to have an equal and equitable conversation. And then beyond the moment, equity work is not just about.
Lost you there for a second.
Let me turn off my camera. Does this help? Is it better? Hello? Hello?
I can hear you.
Oh yeah, you can. Okay. Maybe Joe can't, but the rest of you can. I don't know. All right. So then the other thing is beyond the moment. So it's not just about what we do when we give students a syllabus, or what we do when we're in class with them, or what we do when we're in a workshop with them, but it's also about what do we do in between? How do we sort of sustain and build an inclusive, equitable community so that beyond that moment, it can help build a more equitable environment. So. All right, so we're going to try this thing called TRIZ. Does anyone here know what a liberating structure is, or has anyone ever heard of TRIZ? Okay, so I'm going to put a link to the Liberating Structures website. Oh, well, it's not clickable, but anyway, it's liberatingstructures.com. And liberating structures are ways of structuring conversations with people so that everyone has an equitable opportunity to participate. And they can usually help with creativity and engagement and so on. They're useful to use in workshops and classes and meetings and everything. So TRIZ is a way to work backwards to solve a complex problem. And so basically you think, okay, what's your actual goal? Your goal is to promote socially just care in your institutions, right? That's what our goal is, to promote socially just care in our institutions. So for TRIZ, we do the opposite. We do an anti-goal. So what if our institution's goal was to devalue socially just care? What would we do? So usually the way we do TRIZ is to use breakout rooms for groups of like 4 or 5 people, talk about it and then come back here. But I think we can do it using the chat. Is that okay with folks? So what I want you to do is pretend that you're in a situation where you're responsible for making your institution do everything possible to devalue socially just care. What are some of the things you would do to make that happen? Let me know in the chat, or if somebody actually wants to unmute, that's also cool. Okay, many strict and enforced policies, draconian policies around late work, attendance, yes. Doesn't make room for circumstances, right? Lay off staff team that supports student mental health. Yes, Trina, thank you. So many institutions do that, or they don't hire enough people. No flexibility, make decisions about transparency, yes. No options to get back on track for a struggling student, definitely, Caroline. Defund student groups, yes. Don't talk about it, just ignore it, yeah. Subjective evaluations, and evaluations are always subjective, actually. But yeah, there are ways it can be more objective. Defund academic resource centers, yes. Yes. I like the emphasis on defunding, because whatever they say, if they're defunding something, they're not valuing it, right? Like, they can say whatever they want, but they're defunding it. Advance other priorities like research, grants, football, exactly, yes. So all the things that they don't fund, all the things that they don't consider for tenure and promotion and things like that, these are things they've devalued. And these things are important for socially just care, right? I'll just wait a couple more minutes in case someone else has something to say, and then we'll move on to the next slide. Michelle, not listening, student needs, I agree.
Can I just say
Promote-
something instead of
Yes,
typing? Is that
please.
possible?
Yes, of course, yes.
Because
Go
my
ahead.
typing, it takes forever. One thing I was going
Go
to say
ahead,
is bogging down people who have been hired to do some of this work and giving them other things so that now their job becomes something completely different.
Oh, wow. Yeah, definitely that. And that happens quite a lot, actually. I've seen that as well. Thank you for that. If anybody else also wants to unmute, go ahead. I'm just going to read what's in the chat and then give people a chance if someone wants to speak up. So Erin says, promote pedagogies that are known to be harmful to marginalized groups. Yes, thank you. There's so much of that going on, right? And being considered like rigorous or whatever. Removing autonomy and decision-making from almost everyone except highest administration. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Emily, because why should it take 3 layers above someone to be able to do anything, right? It's ridiculous. They're so far away, they don't even know why they're taking decisions. Sorry, apologies if anyone here is higher administration. And Caroline, ending community partnerships, yes, or emphasizing business over cultural partnerships. I love that. And participate in gentrification. Really cool. Would anyone else like to add anything orally? Okay, if you want to later, of course, we can do that. All right, so I'm because a lot of you are from Kenyan, I'm not going to ask you to do this out loud, but I'm going to ask you to just keep it in mind, like what in your own practice resembles in any way something that we've listed here. Also, there are more comments in the chat, not requiring higher admin to do DEI growth themselves. Oh yeah, of course, that. Like everyone else needs DEI, but they don't. And they're all white men or whatever. And Christina, expecting only certain groups to work on projects regarding inclusion, and that happens quite a lot too, right? So yeah, so I think I want you to look at 2 things. What are some practices that happen in your own institution? And in what ways might you yourself be complicit in some of those practices? And, you know, be harsh on yourself with this, because probably the very extreme things you're not doing yourself because you're here in this session and you care about equity. But there might be certain things that you kind of do a little bit as well. So, I mean, one of the things that I'm really bad at is that I work evenings and weekends and everything. And sometimes I ask my colleagues to do that. And that's not, I mean, I don't ask them to do that, but I just send them stuff at any time. And that's not fair to them. I should not do that. All right. So, and then think about what can you personally do on your own within your control and influence to improve? What can you stop? You know, what can you stop doing that would help towards better? So now we're thinking what our actual goal is: socially just care in institutions. What are certain things that are happening in my institution that I have control to stop that are harmful? And where do I need help? Where do I need allies? And then what's the first step I can take towards improving that? So I'll give you a minute to think about that. Like, what is something that you personally might be able to do to change something within your own department or institution or circle of influence? And if something comes to mind and you want to unmute or mention in the chat, please go ahead. Oh, I love that. Ashley, having my working hours may not be the same as your working hours. Please don't feel obligated to reply us out. Yeah, I should add that because I'm one of those, especially that I work with people across different time zones all over the world. So that's definitely a thing. And I should have that in the signature. I think I'm gonna do that like today. Thank you, Ashley. I love it when I learn new things when I'm doing a keynote. And you're saying someone who will forget to do things if I don't do them when I'm thinking of them, but I don't expect others to reply immediately. Yeah. It's awesome. Yay. So several of us are stealing this. Do we have to like cite you? I've seen it in others though, in other people's signatures, but it just never occurred to me to do it myself. I should. Okay. No citation necessary. Thanks. I'm very careful about citation. Anyone else want to say anything else? Either a suggestion that other people can follow that you're doing already, or something that you might decide to do differently now that we've just sort of talked about these things?
I'll be brave. I think Kenyon broadly
Thanks.
has a problem with, has a usual suspects problem, has a you were good at this last time, you get to do it again and keep doing it, and now it's part of your job. Just kind of scope creep, and that's not uniformly distributed across people on campus, and it's probably not uniformly distributed across people who I ask for help in my center, and I could do better at that, and I could use help from my colleagues in identifying this person's really good, you should connect to find out who the other people are that we could be both elevating and relying on better.
That's great. That's good. Yeah. So seeing this particular issue in your institution and deciding that at least within your own circle, you can do differently. And Eric's saying that's common, especially POC STEM faculty, because of course, I assume there are few. And so that becomes a heavier burden, right? Would anyone else like to contribute something before I move on? No problem. We can move on. All right. So I think one of the reasons that DEI sometimes doesn't work, and I'm curious why you guys think it doesn't work, but I think one of the reasons it doesn't work is that social justice is multidimensional and multi-layered. And we know this, of course, intuitively, but I think there's a lot of solutionism with institutional policies towards this, where they say, oh, we're going to only work on disabilities, or we're going to only work on mental health where it's a diagnosis, or we're going to only work on gender. And this kind of thing drives me crazy. And also it's multi-layered. It can be at different levels. So I'm not going to reveal too much because we are at the choose your own keynote. So we have 20 minutes left. And I'm going to ask you guys to get on Slido once again and choose your own keynote. Let's just give me a second. Just takes a minute to load. So get ready to vote on what you'd like to hear about for the rest of the session today. 1, 2. Okay, here we go. You should be able to see it, but I'll share my screen as well. It's easier to see it. Okay, so which of these are you most interested in? There's more stuff that can appear on my screen, but you should be seeing it on Slido where you're answering. I just need to keep track of how many people are answering. It's always interesting for me to watch this as it goes, because what tends to take a lot of votes at the beginning is not necessarily what takes a lot of votes at the end. It's just what the first few people voted for, you know? So that's interesting. All right, I'm seeing a lot of interest in the concrete community building activities, which is great. I'm really happy to hear that. When we're finished voting about this, I'm going to ask you guys if you're up for trying a community building activity that uses breakout rooms. So if you are, I can actually demonstrate one of them that Joe and I have done together in different. Someone say cheese. Yeah, there's cheese. Okay, that's a lot of people have already voted. So there are 3 things that are almost equal in terms of of interest. We might have time for all of them. I'm not 100% sure, but okay, it's kind of stable right now, the voting. So Joe, can you help me keep track that these are the 3 that we've got right now? The concrete community building activities, the 4 Eyes of Oppression with Legos video, the Rumi cheese, and the compassionate design inspired by prayer and indigenous culture. I will do the 4 Eyes of Oppression video third, because you can always watch that on your own. I mean, the difference was we watch it together and then we discuss it. So if we run out of time, I'll leave that one to the 4th. Okay, so we'll do concrete and then Rumi cheese and then compassionate design. And then 4 Eyes of Oppression if we have time. All righty. Yes, thank you so much. All right. So my next slide is just going to help me move between the slides. And I'll just share my screen again. And so the concrete community building activities. Oh, I need to wait. I need to stop the Slido because it gets in the way of links on slides. Sorry. All right, here we go. Oop, yeah. You guys see my screen? But you're seeing the wrong thing. Wait, here we go. Yeah. You can see this, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you for bearing with me. I lost myself for a minute there. All right, so these are the community building activities that I mentioned earlier. I co-developed them with a lot of people, but the main curators were Mia Zamora, who I mentioned before, and Autumn Keynes, who was the co-director of Virtually Connecting as well. And here's, you know, these are just examples of what's there. So it's split up into introductory activities, warm-up activities, ongoing community building, setting the tone, and some sort of guidance and help types of things. And we just added a new category for reflection and metacognition. Oops, I did not mean to click that. What did I click? Okay. So the first thing that I do that I think is relevant and a lot of people could benefit from, and these links are live. So if you're looking at the slides, you can just click them and read more about them. One of them is annotating the syllabus. So I invite my students, I learned this from Remy Kalir, obviously, and it's the idea of making your syllabus, if you're online, making it into like a Google Doc and inviting all your students to look at it and make comments and say, oh, I like this, or I'm not sure what this means, or I'm worried about that, or, you know, so you get to know what interests them, what worries them, what things are unclear to them. And you can do this at the beginning of the semester, which is what I do. I don't, you know, students don't usually read the syllabus, but when I do this, they do. And not only do they read the syllabus, but they see the colleagues' comments. So they ask different comments because somebody's already asked that question. They know the answer now, and they don't have to, hi, Christina. They don't have to ask the same question again. And so they get a lot of their questions answered just in the first week of the class because I do them as an assignment. You can also get students to come back to the syllabus in the middle of the semester to give you feedback on how the first few weeks of class were, because this helps jog their memory as to, oh, we did this reading, we did that activity, we had this assignment, and they can still give feedback on that. And then another thing that I do is survey students at different points. I survey them before they come to class, especially during the pandemic. I'd see like what kind of internet do you have, what kind of device do you have? Are you comfortable having your camera on? And if not, why not? And a lot of them would explain to me why not. And things like that. With once we came back face to face, I started teaching like an 8:30 a.m. class, and I would ask them, "Are you good? Are you a morning person? Are you good at waking up at 8:30 in the morning? Well, 7 probably to get to class at 8:30." I would ask them what are their strengths with certain things, so that when I put them in groups for group work in class, that I could sometimes make sure that a more tech savvy person was in each group to help out with. I teach digital literacy, so that helps that someone is tech savvy, for example. And I also survey in the middle of the semester to get their feedback on certain things. And I survey them sometimes at the end of each class with just like what I call a 2-minute paper, where I say, okay, what did you learn most? What's the most important thing you learned? What's unclear? What did you enjoy? So I add this enjoyment to the regular minute paper. And that helps. And I look at that and come back to it all the time. I also use third places outside of class meeting time. So I don't know how everyone else does this, but I use Slack. I don't know if you're familiar with it, just so that students between classes can ask me questions, ask each other questions. Some people use WhatsApp or Discord or something like that. If you use any of those things or you're interested in any of those things, let me know in the chat. Another one is that I always do the check-in of how are you feeling, and I always do some kind of warm-up activity to get them going at the beginning of the class, like wild tea or a spiral journal. So I would like to try a wild tea with you guys in a minute. We'll do a short wild tea. Sometimes the wild tea online can be just the chatterfall that we did at the beginning, but you can also do, it's like a speed networking thing. And you can just do it quickly in rounds with breakout rooms online. And it's really fun to do face-to-face too. I think it's also important to talk and talk about and practice trauma-informed pedagogy. To let them, it helps them a lot to recognize that a lot of their struggles that they're going through right now is because of the trauma of the pandemic and the social isolation and the uncertainty and all of that, they're not, it's not that they're bad online learners or they're not smart people who suddenly became stupid. It's everyone's cognitive load is different and everybody's struggling in different ways. And I also do gratitude journaling. Like I give my students like a 5% of their grade to do some kind of self-development, whether it's meditation or yoga or whatever makes them happy. Gratitude journaling seems to be the one. This semester, a lot of people did meditation actually, but a lot of times gratitude journaling, just at the end of each day, thinking about 3 things that makes them grateful, helps them. And it's been helping my own daughter. Like even when I had COVID, it helped her feel okay while I had COVID by thinking about, okay, there must have been 3 good things that happened today. And there's usually 3 good things, even on the worst days. And then Troika Consulting is really cool. It's a way to get students, it promotes peer support, right? And just getting 3 students together to help each other. And if you watch the demo video, you'll see how it works, but it's really phenomenal how they can learn that they can learn from each other and help each other in ways that we hadn't thought about. And then Triz as a playful way to solve problems that we hadn't, that we tried together today, but usually done in small groups. All right, I'm gonna unshare my screen. Are you guys okay to do 2 very quick rounds of breakouts? I'm going to ask a question in the chat that has a very quick answer. And then you'll answer it with a partner and come back, and then I'll send you again. And usually this will be like 5 rounds, but I'll just do 2 rounds. Okay. So I am going to do, oh, there's someone in the waiting room. All right. So I'm just going to recreate these breakout rooms. And the question I'm going to ask you is, and I'll let you go in trios just in case someone drops out or is not at their computer or something. And the question I'm going to ask you is, if you had a superpower, what would you like it to be? So a playful question that I think, and that question should come with you to the breakout room. So you should be fine. There are 3 people. I'll give you 3 minutes. And then we'll come back really quickly. So that's about 1 minute person. So make sure you give time for each person to say their superpower. If you finish early, come back early. That's fine. I don't think it's going to happen, but okay. I'll see you guys in 3 minutes. Hey, Joe.
So over here, we have a vote for retractable clause, and we have a vote for flying.
What?
So I'm in a room with some other people. So
Okay.
Alex says he wants to try.
Oh, that's what he'd like as a superpower. Okay.
I think I would
Okay.
like to be able to fly places. I think that would be.
You'd like to be able to fly places. And what? Who else? Ashley. What's Ashley saying?
Ashley wants to fly too.
I want to fly. I want to teleport.
So Maha wants to teleport. Eric just wants time travel.
Oh, time traveler is not. Time travel is nice. They've got the. I don't know if you guys know the book, The Time Traveler's Wife, but it's been made into a movie, but now it's been made into not Netflix, TV show.
Yeah. I've been seeing the trailers. I haven't read the book. So
I read the book. It's really good. Really good in a bad way, kind of thing. It's problematic in terms of gender relations, I think.
it looked a little that way.
So Seher, I don't know who Seher sounds like a Turkish name or something, or Indian name.
I think that's right. I think Turkish is correct.
Yeah, but probably Sheher, not Seher. I don't know. Anyway, but they're here, and I don't know if they meant to be here or if they just came in. I don't think there's time for another breakout room, right?
No,
It's
probably not.
just yeah.
There is a 10-minute break just to let people stand and stretch and all
When's
that.
that?
So it's between this and the next one. The next one starts at 2:10.
Oh, that's good.
So there's a little slush time in there, but it's supposed to be the bio break time. So
I'm hearing something really weird.
no.
I feel like the doorbell's ringing. I'm not going to answer the door anyway. So.
Okay.
And- Okay. So then the next thing people wanted was
So it was a tie between the Rumi cheese analogy and it was a three-way tie between the four eyes of oppression, the Rumi cheese analogy,
yeah. So I'll do the Rumi cheese.
passionate design, and prayer.
I'll do the Rumi cheese.
Okay.
Okay, close the breakouts. Welcome back, everyone. So there's no time to send you out again, but normally there would be like 5 rounds of really quick questions and you'd be with a different group each time. And so you'd meet like 15 people in 15 minutes or something. All right, so I'm going to go to the Rumi cheese analogy because it's just easier on my slides to find it and they were tied. So this is based off of something called the Swiss cheese analogy. If you've never seen it before, there's a blog post about it. It's Ian McKay. He was talking about respiratory illnesses like COVID and how you spread it. And there are different ways of stopping the spread, like cheese. So you know how there are holes in the cheese? So every layer covers some things, but there's still holes that the virus can come through and reach the person, right? So things like you physically stay at home if you're sick, or you wear a mask, or hand hygiene will cover some amount of, stop some amount of virus from spreading, but there's more, right? And then there are some things that you do individually as a responsibility, and some are shared responsibilities, like ventilation, like vaccines. These are things that governments need to do, right? So with the Rumi cheese analogy, I'm just going to skip this slide and just explain it. With the Rumi cheese analogy, it's for, Rumi cheese is an Egyptian cheese, by the way, that's why I chose it. And it's got holes as well, but it's also got sometimes black peppercorns, and I'll explain why that's important here. But thinking about it, like if Rumi cheese analogy is for caring and equitable education, and you think there are probably lots of different viruses, right? It's not just one virus, because diverse causes of inequity, right? Racism, classism, heteropatriarchy, ableism, neuronormativity, xenophobia, all of that, right? And there's intersectionality, and there can be larger systemic and smaller individual solutions. So I think every strategy we use in our class addresses some of the oppression. So if you do something like culturally relevant pedagogy, I don't know if this is familiar to you. Yes, Eric. Okay, I didn't know that was also used for plane crashes. So culturally relevant pedagogy, I don't know if any of you practice it or if it's familiar, it would be good for addressing like racism, it would be good for addressing xenophobia. It would not necessarily be good at addressing, not necessarily normativity or ableism, for example, right? Now the black peppercorns in the Rumi cheese is something that some people really, really like, and some people it really irritates them. And I think with any educational intervention that you do, first of all, you're not going to be able to do everything. By Trina, you're not gonna be able to do everything. And also some of the things you do might make some groups uncomfortable while making some other groups feel joy. And I think anyone who teaches knows this, like there's something they found like 80% of the class are loving it and then 20% are really not liking it. And if it's something that promotes justice for an underrepresented group, then I think it's okay for the, you know, the more powerful dominant group in society to be uncomfortable a little bit. But if it's between two different underrepresented groups and one of them will feel good and the other not feeling good, then we need to reassess the situation or make sure that we have other layers to help with other things, right? So normally I would invite you to think about what are the different, isn't your students particularly face? And for example, I was asking once about trauma-informed pedagogy would be a good strategy, I think, during the pandemic for everyone, but also to recognize we're all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat, because African and Asian Americans, I think, it's widely recognized that it hit them harder at the time last year when they were going through a really hard time. People with pre-existing mental health challenges might probably be much worse off during the pandemic in terms of the impact of the trauma on them than those of us who were healthy and then had a little bit of trauma on top of being healthy, right? So what I'm just going to suggest is think about your own situation. What are the causes of inequity and need for care in your context, and which of these strategies are useful for you? Whatever strategies work, right? What are some individual things that you can do in your class? What are things that your institution can do, like the pass fail policy that a lot of institutions did at some point, like rewarding mentoring and things like that. And one of the things that people say when I tell them this idea is they say that you're asking a lot of teachers. You're asking us to have like 10 strategies. And what I always say is we don't need to do all of them at the same time and learn all of them in 1 second, but you need to give yourself time to learn one at a time as you get to know your students. I thought we'd have more time than we actually have, and we're actually out of time. So I won't be able to cover the others, but everything's in the slides. So if you want to go back and look at them, you can do that. I'm gonna share my screen to do something very quick, which is, but we started like a few minutes late, so it's not me that was, I think you guys, we started late. What is a key takeaway you got from today? Let me know in the chat. And in the meantime, I want to tell you guys that I'm organizing this thing called My Fest. It's a mid-year festival. It's a 3-month-long learning experience where you can dip in and dip out to whatever you're interested in. And I'm going to post the link to the website here and the registration. And it's a pay what you can. So if you can't afford it, you just let us know. And there's a promo code on there and you can get more promo codes. Take a look at the site and see if anything interests you. And so just let me know what's your key takeaway. And this is my email, my Twitter, and this is how I ask for feedback on my keynotes. I'm going to put that also in the chat. The Matrix, Caroline, I'm glad you like the Matrix. And the paper is open access, so the link is there in the slides if you want to follow up on it. Actually, if you Google Equity Care Matrix, you'll find it, I think. There is a group rate. Yes, Joe, there is a group rate. Different lenses to view DI work. Okay, I'm happy to hear that. You guys will really like the 4 Eyes of Oppression video with the Lego, so I would advise you to go look at that. It's really, really cool, and it's like 4 minutes or something, but it really captures it really, really well. Like even my 10-year-old understood what that was about. So what else? What are other key takeaways folks have? And of course, if someone has any questions, I'm ready to answer them. But I know that you're supposed to have a 10-minute break, and if we're talking about care, I don't want to take it away from you, but I can stay for 10 minutes, but maybe Joe wants to take a break. And you can always, I'm going to put my Twitter handle again in the chat and my email if someone wants to stay in touch. Or if you want to come to my fest, you'll see me a lot. The spreading the work more equitably thing. I'll give you a really nice example of that. They say that there's starlings, they're kind of birds, and they have something called murmurations, and they follow each other in large groups. But what they do is they don't follow one leader. They follow this, they adapt to the 7 neighbors closest to them, and that's how they all work together, instead of all of them from the beginning to the end following one leader and that leader having all the responsibility. They just need to care for the 7 closest to them, and I think if something goes wrong, the ones closest to them help out until they can join back again and things like that. I thought it was very interesting, and I remembered the number 7 neighbors because actually in Islam we're advised to take care of our 7th neighbor, up to our 7th neighbor, but not more than that, like not your 8th neighbor. So it seems like the number 7 is special that way. That was very funny. Thank you all. I'd still love to hear more about your takeaways, but if you have a minute to do that before you leave. Thank you.
Well, let me
That's
do
great, Jay.
the formal, and this is not to cut off conversation. I think we should definitely keep talking about those takeaways because they're always useful to find out what someone else is taking away. But please do, as you already are, join me in thanking our colleague and my friend Mehabeli for this wonderful keynote this afternoon.
Thank you all so much for being here and for your participation and your great ideas. Yeah, enjoy exploring it, Emily. It's really lovely. So many people from all over the world contributing ideas. It's really good. Eric, that's an interesting one. I don't think it's not about not caring about the larger human race. I think it's about recognizing our capacity to care deeply. You cannot care deeply for everyone in the larger human race, but you can care deeply and sustainably to a small number around you. And if everybody cares for the 7 around them, then everybody will be cared for by 7 others or 6 others or whatever. You know what I mean? Because my 7th neighbor, on the other side of them, there are more neighbors, right? You think about that, then everybody, and there isn't one person who has to care for 50 while some other people care for no one. One of the issues in my institutions, for example, you have one person who's supervising 10 theses and one person who's supervising 2 theses, and they both get paid the same amount, and they're told this is part of your job. If it's part of my job, then we should all be getting the same number of theses. But the students know some professors are caring and they give better feedback, so they seek them. And then the professors care, so they take on the extra work, right? But it shouldn't be like that. Then the ones who don't know how to care should be taught how to care rather than be given a free pass, or the ones who care should be given more money, something. If you're not going to distribute the work equally, then you shouldn't distribute the money equally. You know, like something has to be done differently, I think. So. Yeah.
Actually, if you let me
yes,
speak for 1 second on that one,
Yeah,
that's a
go ahead.
really common complaint. I mentioned this when Joe mentioned it before. We've had an issue here at Gettysburg. We hear it a lot from faculty of color in the STEM area, that there are few of them, and because of that, students who want to go into STEM drift towards them for academic advising. In many ways, that's not informal chain. In other words, these people end up taking on much larger advising loads than other groups do. Without it ever being acknowledged or anything like that. It doesn't show up when it comes time for promotion and tenure.
Exactly.
And I know it's been a real drag on morale here. I've heard that from multiple STEM faculty.
I agree. And I was telling our Dean of Sciences and Engineering the other day, how many people got promoted without ever doing that kind of work and tenured, and how many people are excellent at doing this kind of work and then they don't get tenured and they leave. And don't tell me it's one of the elements that we consider if it doesn't make a difference in tenure and promotion. You have to make it matter. You have to make it. When you guys were talking about how do you devalue these things, you talked about funding and you talked about something else, but like mainly about like how much emphasis do you really put your money where your mouth is type of thing, right? So definitely. And your point about caring about the future, 50 years from the future, but I think what people can think about, I guess, people think about, oh, what about my grandchildren? And that feels more personal. It's kind of like, and I'm sorry that so much violence happens in the US, but when it happens to your cousin or of course it feels different. I used to live in Houston And it felt different that, oh, I used to live in Texas and I didn't have a child at the time. And I didn't realize how scared I'd be every day my daughter would go to school. You know, it's been happening everywhere in the US, obviously, but when it happens in Texas, it touches me more because I've lived there. It's a human thing, I think. So the more people we know on the other side of the world, like if we do more global citizenship and intercultural learning and that kind of thing, the more they will empathize with people on the other side of the world as not a picture they see on a screen that has, I don't know, some crisis, but they're actually humans who have lives and all that.